What impact will allegations of South Africa selling arms to Russia have on the South Africa and African Growth and Opportunity Act? This is the question. The legislation significantly enhances market access to the U.S. for qualifying Sub-Saharan African countries. To talk a little further about some of the issues that have come up, we're joined now by Stellenbosch University's Strategic Studies Department Head, Professor Abel. Esterhuyse, a very good evening to you. Thank you so much for speaking to us. So just as we've seen this drama play out, can we categorically say the South African government has repeatedly ignored United States intelligence, that it has supplied weapons and ammunition to Russia, and that information is 100% credible?
Well, let's reflect on what unfolded. I think the whole issue is clouded in secrecy. Let's think about the visiting of the ship, how it arrived here in secrecy, how the navigation of the ship was not on, how it was uploaded, offloaded overnight, how everybody sort of declined to answer questions in good faith and to respond to a wide range of questions about what the ship was doing here. And then, of course, how the government responded yesterday in Parliament by means of the President to the issue. But I think the important point here that we shouldn't miss is to decode the diplomatic language from the United States. And I think that diplomatic language is one of a very clear message for not only South Africa, but also Africa and the rest of the world. And the ship just provided the US with the opportunity to send that message. And the message is, we will tolerate neutrality in terms of the war between Ukraine and Russia, but nothing beyond that.
Okay, let's stop there, Prof, because I want us to just do this as chronologically as possible before we reach that conclusion, because I want South Africans to understand what is fact fiction and what is conviction. Now, the issuing of a démarche to the U.S. ambassador, you spoke about diplomacy, so that's a diplomatic tool. Is South Africa saying it's launching its own investigation and therefore evidence of sovereign prudence? Or rather, is it an indication that there could be a valid question over the credence of U.S. intelligence, and some would say, AKA weapons of mass destruction in Iran?
Well, I think one has to understand, and I think this is important, the US would not have responded in a way and not have reacted to what unfolded if it wasn't based on clear evidence. They would have done their work. And I think we have to understand that. The United States is a country that's normally good in terms of its intelligence ability, and it would have done its homework. It would not have issued the warning to South Africa if it wasn't convinced that it will sort of fly in the diplomatic and political environment. And I think that is important to understand that.
Okay.
And let me also say that there's nothing secret about the US knowing about the ship. Every single citizen in South Africa knew about the ship. That's what diplomats are for in a country. They have interest in South Africa. If you have interest in a country, you take a careful look at that country. You try to understand what is unfolding in that country. And this is precisely what the US diplomats have done.
Okay. Because we're going to run out of time, and I need to ask this important question, Prof, is the issue of international statutes that govern the sales of arms. So is there anything in place that prohibits the sales of arms between South Africa and Russia at this point, even though government says it knows nothing about it? The role of denial has been questioned, and all of that is important. But is the more important thing, you spoke about frustration by the US on the non-neutrality, non-alignment of South Africa on the Russia-Ukraine war. Is the frustration more about the fact that those munitions, that weaponry could be used by Russia in the war against Ukraine?
Well, I think there's definitely concerns about that in the Western world at large, in Europe and the United States. And of course, there's stringent and very important regulations and stipulations in terms of the Convention's Arms Control Act in South Africa that government ought to adhere to. There's a process to be followed. There's approvals. There's a clear paper trail, if I can put it like that, for every transaction of this nature. So end user certificates. So there is no doubt, and there ought to be a very clear paper trail on this, with approvals and decisions by people. And there's no way that those in the bureaucracy and important politicians can say they didn't know about this, because they would have approved it. So this is a question of how the government is now responding to this. And with the Commission of Inquiry, I think the President have simply put it on the long haul. He's postponed any sort of tough decisions on this issue. And perhaps until the election, and also until the war have taken its course, perhaps 6 months, a year down the line, and then we'll probably have a clearer picture of what unfolded.
Thank you so much for your time and insights. Stellenbosch University Strategic Studies Department Head, Professor Abel Esterhuyse.